Today on the Tearsheet Podcast.
If I have my virtual reality headset on, right, I'm not going to pull out a credit card and try to swipe it right on the side of the headset or something along those lines, right? So like, what are the characteristics of if I wanted to transact?
Welcome to the Tearsheet Podcast. I'm Zack Miller, Tearsheet's editor-in-chief. I find it fascinating to hear how some of the largest FIs handle emerging technologies. Fidelity, for example, has the Fidelity Center for Applied Technology, where it tests and assesses new tech, like the metaverse and blockchain. It's almost like Fidelity's skunkworks R&D arm. Today on our program, I have Adam Schouela, the head of emerging technology at the center. Our discussion spans different technologies, emerging use cases, and sheds some light on how Fidelity thinks about its priorities and customers out into the future. We talk about the experiments Adam and company have done around blockchain technology, around the metaverse, and where it sees opportunities, and just as importantly, where it doesn't see opportunities. Adam Schouela is my guest today on the Tearsheet Podcast.
Hi, my name is Adam Schouela. I'm head of emerging technology at Fidelity Center for Applied Technology. So it's basically almost like the R&D side for the R&D group. Yeah, the skunkworks for Fidelity Investments. And really what we like to focus in on are looking out into the future a little bit to try to understand what are the different technologies that have the potential to impact both our customers as well as our associates, and how they interact with us and other institutions and things like that.
And does the center cut across Fidelity's different businesses, whether you're retail business or the institutional business?
Absolutely, and it was designed that way, right? In such a way that if we're doing an experiment where we find learnings about one particular thing, it's not just solely for our retail clients or something along those lines that might benefit from something along those lines. The idea is that as we find these different things, as we get different learnings, we're able to share it across lots of different business units. So, for example, if we were within a business unit, right, and the business units are all doing these types of things as well, right? That Fidelity is a very innovative company, right, as a whole. But our whole main job is to do these types of activities. And if we were dedicated to one of these different business units, then if it didn't fit with that business unit, then it would stop, right? But in our particular situation, if it doesn't fit with one particular business unit, there's other areas where we're able to go and shop some of these different ideas around and really translate the implications of what these new and emerging technologies have on Fidelity.
And do ultimately for technologies that you do end up seeing have a future in Fidelity, do they end up then residing or going home into one of the units? Is there a graduation process from the center to the business unit?
Sure, absolutely. It doesn't. So there's lots of different ways that something can graduate, right? So everything from a product being created or developed and then transitioning over into the business, all the way through to a business unit, spinning up off on its own. But the other side of it also is there could be things where we're doing the research and we find that there's nothing there, right? That's valuable also.
Sure.
And that information.
A no is important. Yeah.
A no is important, right? Just as important, right? So, and having all of these different types of information, right? Whether it's a product or an idea or a concept, transition into the business or impact the business in lots of different ways.
Awesome. So Adam, pretend I'm a senior executive in another financial institution, maybe not a direct competitor to Fidelity. And I've been reading about the metaverse and its potential for new payments experiences, investing experiences, banking experiences. Given what you've found, would you encourage me to explore the metaverse at this point?
So I think the first thing that I would say is that if you were to pull up your favorite search engine and Google the definition of the metaverse, right, before you get a chance to scroll down a little bit, you'll find at least 4 different definitions of what the metaverse is, right?
That's a good point. What is the metaverse?
With the caveat of that, right? So what I would say though is that the definition of the metaverse is evolving right now, right? And this is something that so there's lots of different ideas, lots of things that are sort of bubbling up and falling down and swirling around. So what we like to do is try to be able to understand, what are the things that have, like, what are the little pieces of things? What are the things that have that potential of sticking? What are those unique characteristics that seem to be evolving from the metaverse, right? Or from the conversation around the metaverse, that have the potential of, having some staying power and lasting into the future, right? So, I'll give you one example. So, virtual reality is a way, right, of people connecting in, let's say, with the metaverse. It's not the only way, right? There's a very broad definition of the metaverse, where the metaverse is all around you, whether or not you're in, a virtual reality, environment, or, just sort of in your house, right? So, or walking down the street. But
we're two talking heads on a screen. I mean, that could be
exactly
the metaverse as well, right?
Exactly. At the end of the day, right? So, virtual reality has a very unique characteristic of empathy transfer, and the metaverse has this concept of, or one of the things that seems to be sticking is that there's going to be a lot of people involved, right? So, like, you're not going to go into the metaverse necessarily alone, right? So this concept of, potentially shared experiences, right? Of having an experience with a shared experience with people potentially around the world, right? So there's all different, different opportunities, right? That come along with something along those lines, right? And you had mentioned payments and transacting, and that's down the line, right? Like, if I'm having a shared experience or something along those lines, and I might want to purchase something or transact in some way, shape, or form, then that is something that we'll want to look into, and what are the and how is that going to happen, right? If I have my virtual reality headset on, right, I'm not going to pull out a credit card and try to swipe it right on the side of the headset or something along those lines, right? So, like, what are the characteristics of, if I wanted to transact in that space with some sort of currency, right, in some way, shape, or form. Another transaction, actually, because there's so many different people that are there, are actually social transactions, right? And it's looking at, how do we facilitate, secure, all of that sort of stuff as well.
That's very interesting. I guess I want to ask that same question, maybe the inverse. Like, what are some things that won't stick? What is, as you've experimented around, what do you think is not going to work in relation to financial services?
That's a hard question to answer. So that is peering a little bit into the future, and I don't know if I legitimately don't know if I can answer that. So and it's not even necessarily for me to answer that. I think what we're most interested in, right, is what are the things that have the potential of working, right? Whether or not we, a probability of over 1% or whatever it is. And what we try to be able to do is, let's start building in these spaces, right? And start experimenting, so that we understand, what are those design principles for an interaction like this, or a transaction like that we would want to be able to do in that sort of a space. And if it works, great. If it happens, like, if it comes to fruition, right? Great. We understand how we want to be able to interact with that world in that way. And if it doesn't, well, that's okay, right? We built it, we understood what it was and what the potential was, and then we'll put it aside. So I'll give an older example, right? A long time ago, there was back that first what's it called, a wearable watch, right? That was the Pebble watch. It was that first that people
Kickstarter.
that first smart
that.
the Kickstarter, exactly. That it was that form factor that went on people's wrists, right? And we built experiments with that, right? Not because we thought the Pebble watch, the Kickstarter project, was going to be that next big thing, right? It was more along the lines of, well, what if this starts happening more, and our customers, our associates, start using a device like this, right? How would Fidelity show up? And what would the interactions be like for Fidelity in that space? And we did the projects, and then at the end we sort of put it on the shelf, right? Until the Apple Watch came out and it became more mass market, and we were able to be first to market because we already did all of that research and we understood what those Fidelity centric use cases were, what the design principles were around that form factor itself, and we were able to move relatively quickly. So I think that's more of how we like to think about what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
We just try all of it, right? We understand what those design principles are and what those use cases are, and and if it does come to fruition, then we have that ability to move quickly.
So what are the opportunities, I guess, challenges to bring retail investing into the metaverse?
There's a lot. So even from the perspective of identity, right? So whether you're online, right, and potentially even more so potentially in the metaverse, right, where how do you know who the person even that you're transacting with, right? In certain cases, people go onto these sites in order to preserve their anonymity, and in certain cases, it's great, right? Like there's just as many reasons in certain cases to be anonymous as there are to be identified as who you are, right? But in the case of a financial transaction, right, we do want to know who you are, right? And so trying to understand how do we think of even identity and securing those transactions from a payments or financial services transaction perspective.
And is you feeling that it'll be like biometrics or who knows, right? Like
there could be a whole slew of different things that you could do, and these are things that we're actively exploring right now. I don't have the results yet, but so I can't necessarily share those. But these are the types of experiences or the types of things that we're trying to figure out as to what what does it mean, right? If we were to be in this type of a space.
What about the advice layer in the metaverse? Like, do you feel like that's a place people will go to consume, I guess, that kind of like higher level learning and information towards investing? Is there a place for the advice layer within the metaverse? Maybe that's a broader question.
So I'm going to twist it a little bit more towards in order to be able to give advice, right, or even to make a decision, right? The whole point of advice is getting educated on something, right? Is to really truly understand so that you can make an informed decision about what you're doing. The metaverse has, I think, a unique opportunity, right, where some of the characteristics of the metaverse is, one of them being, especially in the virtual reality sort of sense, right, this really powerful tool of empathy transfer, right, and being able to better understand other people or other situations that are happening. So we've done a couple of experiences, right, where actually there's two in particular that I'm thinking of. One is about student loans, right? So if you're thinking about taking student loans, what is the impact that it might have on the family and that sort of stuff? So we had actually created a 360 video, right, where you are sitting at the table with a family where one of their children basically just got accepted to university, and the family has a discussion basically in the kitchen around the table about the student loans and what the impact has and what their uncle's situation is and all that sort of stuff. But you're sitting at the table with them having that discussion, right? That the learning that you get out of like understanding how those dynamics play out, right, is very impactful. Totally different from the advice that you might get if you're walking into somebody's office to have a conversation about something, right? But this is, you're experiencing something that's giving you a different type of learning, right? And that is, and then again, in the metaverse, this could be something that you have by yourself. And then then it can prompt a conversation or a more in-depth conversation, whether it's with an advisor or other individuals, right? In order to, it's like a super like conversation starter, right? In order to get people into that deeper level of understanding. So creating these types of experiences is just completely different. We did another one. This was an older one, but again, something that could go into a metaverse type of a situation where we had it was a retirement sort of calculator type of a thing where you enter in some of your information, like your age and your salary and your contributions to your retirement and things like that, and then you go down onto this green line for Fidelity, and you're following this machine or this puck that goes down towards your retirement. And the actions that you take, so your age or the years go by every 5 years or something along those lines, and the puck will either move forwards or backwards, depending upon how you interact in that sort of life moment, right? These are experiences, right, that people are having that help them better understand the impact of, let's say, long-term decisions and things like that. So it's like you could tell a child that the stove is hot 1,000 times, right? But the second they, if someone touches it, right, then they'll never do it again, right? Like, so how do we give people these experiences to help sort of accelerate that learning in order to be able to make better decisions at the end of the day?
So I really like those two examples, Adam. And I guess even by the fact that you're calling them experiences, a lot of times when we talk about financial services, we're talking about education, or learning or advice, but we don't talk a lot about experiences when it comes to long-term planning. And that's really what I took away from those two examples. Like, I can viscerally feel what it would be like to experience this life unfolding the way in different scenarios, right?
And that's exactly what we're trying to be able to do and help people understand, right? Like, you could tell someone something, or you could have them experience it and feel it, right? And that visceral sense is that's the unique characteristic, right? That we're searching for this technology, right? Like, and any other of these technologies, right? Like, what are those unique things? And then sort of dive deeper into those things.
So given that experiential focus, do you think the nature of or the value proposition of a financial services institution within the metaverse would be likely to evolve?
So, sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I guess if we're moving from outcomes to experiences, call it, does the role of a financial institution change, I guess, in the metaverse?
I think we're still going towards outcomes, right? We're just taking a different path, right? So, there's all the, historically we'd have, let's say, we're using the mediums, right, that we have available to us, right? So if you're on a computer, right, and that is the, and you're on, a traditional web page, right, you could show someone a video, or you can where someone is talking at you, or you can have an article, right? Lots of people read news articles all the time, right? Or listen to podcasts.
I hope they do.
Right, exactly, right. But the idea is that this is when video came out, when video was available to do this, and people switched over to video to have this. Before that, Web 1.0, right, the early versions of the web, it was text, right? So so each one of these things, as the technology evolves, we change our ways of educating people and distributing content, right? This is one of those opportunities, whether or not it happens in the end or not, I don't know, right? But this is one of those opportunities where the technology is changing, right? And so how do we leverage that technology to educate people? And again, at the end of the day, in order to be able to make those best decisions for their financial future and their families.
Awesome. And in the remaining time that we have, I want to shift gears a little bit. It may impact with the metaverse, but I want to hear sort of what you're thinking personally and institutionally around blockchain.
Sure.
So I guess if you can tell us the nature of, I guess, some of the you call them experiments that you've done, and what some of the takeaways might have been.
Yeah. So we have been in the blockchain space and doing research on blockchain for many years. I think 2014 was when we first started. 2014, 2015, like in that.
Do you get like bragging rights with like your friends or your family? You're like, I was looking at that in 2014. I was all over that. You know?
Yeah. So with my family, yeah, it depends upon the social group. A lot of the times I get a lot of glassy eyes when I start talking about what I think are the really super cool things that I get to do. So again, I think at the end of the day, a lot of the experiments that we have, a lot of the stuff that we've done over the course of from a blockchain perspective, is like, all right, this is a new tool, right? Mm-hmm. It's a new tool that we can put in our toolbox. What does it do? What is it good for? How does it even work? Right. So early on, Fidelity got into or FCAT got into mining, like Bitcoin mining, and the reason we got into Bitcoin mining was purely to better understand what does this whole thing do? What does even mining do? Right? Like why do miners even exist? Right? And that whole concept of just understanding those fundamentals of, oh, mining is, recording transactions and securing the network, right? And understanding the details around that, and then trying to understand, all right, well, what are the business cases, right? Where, really a blockchain makes sense versus, just the database, right? Or something along those lines. And a lot of the experiments that we had done over the course of, in the earlier days or something along those lines were around, what is this, and really truly understanding those unique characteristics of it. Also trying to understand, how do people use it, not just from a corporate perspective, right? But from the average, person, how do they interact with this stuff, and what are the mental models that we have to build in order to help people better understand these private keys, right, that are super long, that are completely nonsensical from how do people grasp that, and the concept of, well, yes, if I have this thing, and
I know where all my stuff is.
Yeah. This is my signature that allows me to do anything with it. And if I lose that, there's no 1-800 number to call, right? So how do we start adding, in certain cases, add the layers of abstraction, in other cases, enable folks to be able, and institutions, right, to interact in these spaces. And we've done all sorts of experiments in this space, everything from, doing analysis on, the mining and wallets and transactions and all that sort of stuff, all the way through to, understanding what all these different blockchains even do, right? So, a lot of people have heard of, let's say, Bitcoin or Ethereum, but do they, even from an Ethereum perspective, do people really understand how it works, and what are the capabilities that it brings to the table for different institutions to even interact with each other, right? So if you have two institutions, right, two completely different institutions, the traditional way would be, and they needed to be able to talk with each other, the traditional way would be, well, I'm just going to have an API, right? And I'm going to bust through like a whole bunch of different firewalls and try to be able to make those connections, right? Or if we both have experience, and understanding how to work with blockchain, right, public or private, right, then you have that ability to work together in ways that might be faster or easier than we've done in the past, with the added benefits of having stuff out there.
So I see that in our conversation, you haven't necessarily said this is a good technology, we're excited about this, or this one we're a little bit discouraged, which is fine. So I'm kind of curious maybe to ask a meta question, which is, in your role and as in the center, how have you seen technology evolve? How has your role and your job changed over the past few years?
So one of the things, that's a huge question, right? So like one of the things that I find particularly special about the role that I have is that, and people ask me all the time, right? Like, okay, I'm in augmented virtual reality. I have groups that are working with quantum computing. I have groups that are working with blockchain, and like it's then they'll ask me something along the line, okay, what's the next big thing?
Right. They want to know. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the next
Tell us
big
the
thing
secret.
yeah. What's the secret? And what I tell people is like, first of all, that's not enough, right? Like that's a pretty wide, array from a technology perspective. However, what I find special about the role that I have is the view across all of them, right? It's not each one of these different technologies in a silo, right? There's tons of innovations that's going to happen in those individual silos. Where the real magic happens is in the white space between those silos and starting to connect these different types of things together. So if you think about, like, again, let's say virtual reality or something along those lines, and you think of something like blockchain, where you've got a massive amount of data and information that we've never had before, right? I now have the ability to visualize data in completely different ways, right? And I have all of this data. Can I combine these two types of things together in order to be able to create something, completely different, right? And it's that constant mixing and matching, right? And finding how these, not just how the different bits and pieces interact with each other, right? But how they interact together, right? And those are some of the things that I find the most exciting. And that has, I would say over the course of the years, right, we had to get smart in each one of these different things. And in order to be able to really, truly understand how they interact, we had to be really smart in each one of them, right? So now, as we have lots and lots and lots of experience in these different ones, we're starting to see more and more opportunities for that cross, innovation between them.
Adam, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for joining us on the Tearsheet Podcast today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.